Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, fans out there. This is Battlefield 1. In today's weapon duel, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Model 10A Hunter and the M97 Trench Gun Hunter. We're of course going to be comparing them, looking at their base stats, attributes, and performance on the battlefield, relative of course to each other, as well as of course which one of these is the better choice and which one of these you should be using in what situation. Now, as we always do with weapon duels, we're going to be briefly going over the stats of the individual weapons. If you want more detail on both the playstyle and stats of the weapons, feel free to check out the individual weapon reviews linked down below in the description. With that being said, let's get straight into the first weapon, the Model 10A Hunter. We've got a standard Hunter damage model for shotguns here, meaning of course it's shared both between the Model 10A Hunter and the M97 Trench Gun Hunter. Both have this same damage model with a maximum damage per pellet at 8.4, which you have all the way out to 14 meters. Your minimum damage at 4.2 per pellet is achieved at 21 meters and onwards. The fire rate, of course, is not the same between these two weapons at 78 rounds per minute. The Model 10A has a much lower fire rate. To somewhat compensate for this, however, has a much higher pellet count. Number of pellets per shot here are at 20. Now, before we move on to the remaining stats of the weapon, because of course the damage output of the shotgun is always the most important factor, let's go into a little bit more detail regarding where you're going to be getting a one-shot kill and where not, assuming perfect aim. Now, assuming perfect aim, with the Model 10A, you will be getting a one-shot kill all the way out to 16 meters, and that's with 14 pellets out of your 20 hitting. As soon as you move up to 17 meters, you technically already have to hit 23 of your pellets, and given of course that one shot of your shotgun only produces 20 pellets, that's not possible. Now, it should be said that this is a relatively achievable one-shot distance. The max one-shot distance of the Model 10A is usually a reliable one if your aim's decent, because you only have to hit 14 out of the 20 available pellets, which is not too much to actually ask for. Later, when we get into the M97 Trench Gun, you'll see why I've highlighted this factor. With that being said, then let's move on to the remaining stats. We've got a magazine size here of 6, a little bit better than that of the M97 Trench Gun. However, you're going to be reloading a shotgun on the move anyway. It's got a decent reload times. Actually, the reload times between these two weapons are identical, also on a per shell and of course total level. So per shell, you've got a 1.37 reload for the Model 10A, much like the M97 Trench Gun. Because it's got a slightly larger magazine, it will take a little bit longer to reload the entirety of the magazine, but you therefore get one shot more at 3.87 seconds. That's how long it's going to take you to actually reload the whole thing from empty. Now, recoil on the Model 10A is hefty at 11 vertical, 1 to the left and 1 to the right. That's horizontal recoil and a first shot recoil multiplier of 1, but it's a pump action shotgun, so it shouldn't get into the way of the performance of this weapon too much. With the Model 10A then out of the way, let's move on to the M97 Trench Gun. Now, this once more has a 8.4 per pellet maximum, 4.2 per pellet minimum damage model with the same drop-off structure as the Model 10A. It comes, however, with a much higher fire rate at 138 rounds per minute, but comes with a much lower pellet count per shot at 15, which means of course you're going to be able to fire this shotgun faster, but you're not going to be doing as much damage, at least theoretically. Now, the M97 Trench Gun Hunter has the same maximum distance at which it can one-shot kill enemies, 16 meters. However, much like the Model 10A, at this distance you have to hit 14 pellets. The only problem with this is of course that unlike the Model 10A, which has 20 pellets and hitting 14 out of 20 pellets isn't too difficult, the M97 Trench Gun Hunter only has 15, which means you need to hit 14 out of your 15 pellets, which is something that not always is going to work out for you. However, you can relatively reliably one-shot kill your targets, definitely within 14 meters at this point, because you only require about 12 of the 15 available pellets. Moving on then to the remaining stats. Magazine size here of 5, slightly smaller obviously than the Model 10, one shot less. Reload times, no surprise there, as said previously, they're the same between these two weapons, which means a 1.37 second reload for one shell, and in the case of the M97, because of its slightly smaller total amount of shells it can carry, a 3.37 empty to full reload. Recoil is on the worse and better side depending on which stat you look at, with vertical lesser at 9. However, recoil to the left and right, that's horizontal at 1.5, a little bit higher than that of the Model 10A Hunter. With that being said, then let's move on to the analysis part of the video. How do these weapons differ, and what are their respective strengths and weaknesses compared to each other? Starting off with the Model 10A Hunter. The advantage of using the Model 10A Hunter is that it's going to perform its one-shot kill a lot more reliable. It's going to be more forgiving for slightly, and I do mean slightly in the case of shotgun, sloppy aim. If your aim is not 100% on target but 95% on target, you're still going to get that one-shot kill. There's not that much room to wiggle with the M97 trench gun. You've got a lot less pellets that you can actually miss if you want your one-shot kill. And in practice, because of the 14 out of 15 pellet requirement, the actual one-shot distance for the M97 with decent aim is still going to be 2 meters less than that of the Model 10A Hunter. Now that in itself is not a big difference. 2 meters are not going to make the difference between life and death. However, the higher pellet count and the associated higher amount of, well, if you so will, leeway regarding your aim could make a difference. And such, the Model 10A Hunter very much favors those, or provides benefit to those, who aren't 100% accurate with their shotguns. However, there's a flip side to this coin. While the Model 10A Hunter is more forgiving in giving you that one-shot kill, if you don't get the one-shot kill with the Model 10A Hunter, you're in a lot more trouble than you would be with the M97 Trench Gun Hunter. And this, of course, comes down to fire rate and follow-up shots. The Model 10A Hunter, with its fire rate sitting at 78 rounds per minute, is going to take a very long time until you can actually fire off your next shot. Usually, by that time, if your enemy's decent and aware of the current situation, you're a dead man. In the case of the M97 trench gun, this is a little bit different. You can fire a second shot a lot faster, which means, of course, if you completely miss your one-shot kill, or actually miss your target in the first place, which can happen with shotguns, especially in close quarter frantic situations, you can much more quickly fire off your shot, which means, of course, the M97 may not be quite as forgiving in the aim department. It is, however, a lot more forgiving when it comes to follow-up shots and putting damage down range. Speaking then of damage down range, this is where, of course, being able to put more shots down range is once more opposed to more pellets. You're going to be hitting more pellets at range than you are, of course, with the M97 trench gun with the Model 10A Hunter, because it has more pellets. You're going to be doing slightly more damage. However, in most situations that you should be using your shotgun, and I'm talking about the classic 2-shot kill ranges, say up to 20 meters, it's going to be more beneficial for you to be able to actually do, say, 55 or 60 damage and then put up a follow-up shot much quicker than to do 70 or 80 damage but not be able to put up your follow-up shot before actually dying. And this is where the M97 trench gun can start to differentiate itself from the Model 10A Hunter. There isn't a clear better one amongst the two. It's two different playstyles and preferences. The M97, I believe, in my opinion, because of its ability to more quickly put damage down range, to more quickly fire off its shots, is a little bit more forgiving when it comes to completely missing your one-shot kill and when trying to take out targets at what is to be considered for shotguns medium range. For an SMG, it would still be within close quarters. The Model 10A Hunter rewards, however, those that are accurate with a more likely one-shot kill because, of course, there's slight wiggle room regarding the aim. It also rewards those that have slightly sloppier aim than the people maybe that would want to use the M97 trench gun. If you're using the M97 trench gun and want to be able to compete with a Model 10A on a perfect accuracy basis, that is to say both of the two players actually hit their first shot dead center on, you're going to have to be slightly more accurate than your opponent. However, if you both don't get that one-shot kill, you're going to be able to put your second shot down range so much more quicker than they are, essentially winning that firefight simply on the basis of your faster firing rate. Those are the two differences between the weapons. Which one would I necessarily prefer and for what situation? Well, the Model 10A Hunter for me is a versatile shotgun, but not as versatile as the M97. At least in my opinion, despite its larger magazine size and more forgiving aim, I much prefer to be able to put my damage down range quicker thanks to its faster fire rate. And I find myself with shotguns usually either hit or missing. That's to say, either I'm getting my one-shot kill or I'm not really hitting anywhere close to enough damage where the Model 10A Hunter would make that difference. So I found that in my playstyle, the M97 trench gun usually benefits me more than the Model 10A does. And this is because usually when I fire my shotgun, I'm either missing my shot, and that's usually by a long shot, or I'm dead center accurate, and those few extra pellets aren't going to make a big difference. However, which of these will suit you better is of course going to be dependent much on your aim and how you're using the shotgun. If you're a perfectly accurate person, then using the M97 Trench Gun Hunter is likely the better version. Not only, of course, can you put more damage down range per second, that is to say, when we're talking about multiple targets, not a one-shot kill, you're also going to be more effective at medium range for shotgun purposes, that is, with the M97 than you will be with the Model 10A. If your aim isn't completely horrible but decent, the Model 10A is going to be a little bit more forgiving when you actually take your shots. If your aim is relatively bad and you find yourself having to actually take shots multiple times, even in close quarters where you should be getting one-shot kills, well then maybe once more the M97 is the better choice, because you're going to be able to put your shots down range quicker than you will be with the Model 10A. In essence, you're going to have to try both of these shotguns out relatively extensively, because while there is clear differences in their stats, their playstyles are relatively similar, and both shotguns have clear benefits and clear disadvantages to them, which makes it of course much more difficult to say which of the two is better. I'd like to hear down below in the comments, however, which of these two shotguns is your personal favorite. Do you struggle to decide between the Model 10A Hunter and the M97 Trench Gun? Is your favorite the M97 Trench Gun or the Model 10A Hunter, and why? Feel free to leave that down below in the comments, as well as of course your usual video suggestions for Battlefield 1 videos. But with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 1 video.